For thousands of years, the stars had carried a silent warning, hidden in forgotten ruins, in broken satellites orbiting dead worlds, and in the data archives of ancient civilizations that no longer existed. The warning was clear, but mysterious. Never provoke humanity. No one truly understood what it meant, only that the message appeared wherever destruction had touched the galaxy. Some believed it was just an old myth, a ghost story told to scare explorers from venturing into the unknown. Others thought it was a remnant of an extinct species trying to sound important before disappearing forever. But deep in the archives of the Galactic Council, the warning showed up again and again, always before the fall of powerful empires, always after someone made the mistake of reaching toward a small blue planet in the Sol system. For years, the Council debated its meaning, but because Earth remained quiet, its people peaceful and unarmed by galactic standards, the warning lost its weight. Then came the Zaltari, conquerors, proud and ruthless, ruling over 20 star systems with iron claws and war fleets. To them, Earth was just another weak world, barely crawling out of its system. The Zaltari studied humanity, saw their cities, their old-style space stations, their limited defenses, and they laughed. In the grand theater of interstellar power, humanity looked like a child pretending to be a soldier. The Zaltari warlords saw no threat, only an easy target. The Galactic Council tried to stop them. "Do not touch Earth," the elders warned, unease in their voices. "Let them be." But the Zaltari were not known for listening, and they were certainly not going to fear a species that hadn't even mastered faster-than-light travel on a large scale. To the Zaltari, war was glory, and fear was weakness. Their fleets left their space docks, sleek and silver with red banners of conquest. They headed straight for Earth's orbit, destroying human outposts on the Moon and Mars without even sending a warning. The attacks were quick and brutal. Human colonies, unprepared and poorly armed, fell within hours. From orbit, the Zaltari observed Earth, expecting surrender. But Earth was silent, not the silence of fear, but the silence of focus. Something in that silence made the Zaltari pause. Earth should have panicked. Its people should have begged. Instead, they went quiet. The Zaltari commanders dismissed it as shock, but in that stillness, something ancient and powerful had awakened. Earth's leaders, usually divided by politics, culture, and old grudges, came together in one global broadcast. The voice of humanity, speaking as one for the first time in history, did not beg for mercy. It announced that retaliation would come. Around the world, every factory switched to wartime production. Engineers designed weapons never before imagined, combining centuries of knowledge and creativity. Scientists opened old black projects, and inventors came out of hiding. Even civilians offered their skills. Farmers turned their drones into defense tools. Gamers became drone pilots. Coders rewrote defense programs overnight. In space, satellites began to shift, some going dark, some changing course toward deep orbit. Humanity's war machine, though young, began to move. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species watched in uneasy silence. They remembered the stories, the warnings carved in the ruins. They had thought them to be old lies. But now, seeing Earth's response, some began to wonder, what if the warnings were real? The Zaltari noticed the change in behavior, but they were arrogant and blind to the shift. "Let them resist," the warlord said. "It will make the conquest more exciting." They sent another wave, larger, stronger, this time aimed directly at Earth. As their ships crossed Neptune's orbit, human systems suddenly activated. A trap. Drones powered by quantum AI swarmed out of nowhere, striking weak points in the A fleet. Old satellites turned into EMP mines. Asteroids that had floated harmlessly for centuries suddenly adjusted course, disguised kinetic weapons now hurtling toward the enemy. The Zaltari ships stumbled, confused. Who were these humans? Where did this strategy come from? How had they hidden so much? But by then the damage was done. Earth had bought time, precious time. The Zaltari pulled back, stunned, but not afraid. They would return, they swore. They would burn Earth from the sky. But something deep inside, the commanders had changed. A voice, soft but persistent, echoed in their minds. It was the same warning the universe had whispered to all who had come before. The same sentence found in dying systems, written in languages no one remembered, yet always meaning the same thing: never provoke humanity. Now the Zaltari had ignored it, and something told them they were about to learn why. The moment the Zaltari fleet vanished beyond the reach of Earth's telescopes, leaving behind nothing but wreckage and death, a change swept over humanity, like a rising storm. The attack had killed millions, shattered space colonies, and silenced the moon's proud research cities, but it had not broken Earth. Instead, it lit a fire deeper than any the Zaltari had ever faced. Across the planet, humans looked up at the stars not with fear, but with something more dangerous: resolve. The shock lasted only hours. Then, the world moved. Governments that had once spent decades arguing over borders and trade now sat at the same table, signing unity accords in a single day. Old enemies shook hands not out of friendship but out of survival. Earth declared a global emergency and formed one united command. Military leaders, scientists, engineers, and strategists were all brought into a single massive network. The world's industries were seized, not with force but with agreement, converted into factories for a war Earth had never prepared for, but was now completely focused on winning. The people didn't resist, they volunteered. From the Arctic mines to the deserts of Africa, from underwater labs to orbiting stations, humanity's resources turned inward. Space elevators once built for tourism now carried armor plating and reactor cores. Assembly lines that had once made cars were redesigned to build gunships and drone fighters. Ancient missile silos were opened and upgraded with new technologies, and every university became a training center. The best minds worked around the clock, sharing discoveries that had been locked behind patents or politics. Artificial intelligence, once feared, was now given purpose, coordinating designs, monitoring shipbuilding, writing strategies in seconds. The energy grid was stretched beyond its limits as prototype weapons demanded more power than the planet had ever used in war. Lunar metal was shipped back to Earth, while robotic arms on Mars began assembling the skeletons of war cruisers. Hidden research bases emerged from the shadows, revealing experimental drives, cloaking fields, and weapons that had once been considered too dangerous to use. But Earth had no more time for fear. The Zaltari had declared war. Humanity was simply accepting the challenge. Across the planet, people from all walks of life trained together. Teenagers who once dreamed of becoming influencers now piloted drones in virtual reality war rooms. Retired soldiers returned to teach urban warfare. Old space programs were revived. Every astronaut still alive was called into service. And at the heart of it all was one unshakable belief: they would not be destroyed, they would endure. And if possible, they would strike back. The first fleet, named the Forgeborn, was not sleek or elegant. It was brutal. Made from the bones of mining ships, the armor of decommissioned carriers, and powered by drives not fully tested, these ships looked more like monsters than machines. But they flew, and they were deadly. Each ship carried AI co-pilots, rapid fire, coil guns, plasma lances, and shielding systems layered with strange new alloys. Some even had solar reflectors that could focus the sun's energy into weapons. Engineers laughed as they worked, half in madness, half in pride. No one had ever built a space fleet this fast. No one but humans, but weapons were only part of the war. Humanity knew the Zaltari were more advanced, more experienced. So they turned to their true strength: unpredictability. Human tacticians ran thousands of battle simulations. They studied every alien conflict ever recorded. They learned the patterns and then trained to break them. Ambush, deception, sacrifice, and surprise became their war doctrine. They didn't need to win head-on. They needed to think differently. One general said, "They expect us to fight fair. We won't." In the digital world, hackers launched silent invasions into the galactic networks, planting seeds of disruption. Old satellites, once useless, were reprogrammed to act as traps. Asteroids were fitted with engines disguised as rocks waiting for orders. Space itself became a chessboard, and Earth was learning to play fast. Meanwhile, the people didn't lose hope. They held on to it. Music still played in hidden corners. Families gathered underground, telling stories of ancient human struggles. And slowly, the fear that had gripped the world began to fade. In its place came focus and fury. The fire that had started with the Zaltari strike was now spreading across the stars, carried in the hearts of those who had lost everything and now had nothing left to fear. Earth's skies were full of movement. Shuttles, transports, fighters. The planet that had once begged for peace was now preparing for war with the determination of a wounded beast. And though the galaxy still doubted humanity, those watching closely began to understand. This was not a species that would go quietly. The forge had been lit, the fire awake, and every strike that fell upon humanity had only made them stronger. The Zaltari had wanted to test humanity's strength. Instead, they had awakened something ancient and dangerous: the will to survive, the hunger to fight, and the mind to adapt. Soon, the stars would burn, not because of what humanity had lost, but because of what they had become. The stars over Saturn held their breath as the largest Zaltari war fleet in recorded history moved through the black void, its ships like silver knives cutting across the silence of space. They came with overconfidence, certain that Earth would fall this time, certain that the chaos they had caused was enough to break a species so young. Their sensors showed no human presence, just dead satellites, drifting ice, and distant gas clouds. But space, as the Zaltari were about to learn, had turned against them. In the shadow of Saturn's rings, where radiation and static storms disrupted scans, the first trap sprang. Human warships, smaller, colder, sharper, rose from the shadows like ghosts. They had no smooth designs or polished armor like the enemy. These ships were angular, full of exposed weapons and armor scorched by testing, but they moved with purpose, like predators who had waited for this exact moment. Without warning, they struck. The first blow came from an asteroid field, where hidden launchers fired railguns powered by the planet's own magnetic field. Zaltari destroyers shattered before they could even respond. Panic spread through their formation as human ships danced between their ranks, not in rows or lines like trained militaries, but like wolves surrounding confused prey. The Zaltari tried to regroup, but every time they turned, something new hit them. Mines disguised as space debris, drones that latched onto hulls and exploded from within, and waves of jamming signals that blinded their systems. Their advanced targeting software failed, showing friendly ships as enemies and enemies as shadows. In the middle of the chaos, the Forge-born fleet emerged, Earth's first true interstellar navy, built in months, but forged with centuries of human survival instinct. Commanded by Admiral Soren Vale, a veteran known for solving impossible situations, the fleet didn't follow conventional tactics. Instead of meeting the enemy head-on, they scattered across the battlefield, using Saturn's gravity to slingshot through enemy ranks, dropping sensor jammers and EMP bursts as they passed. Each strike was calculated, each maneuver designed not to destroy but to disorient. The Zaltari, trained for direct war and total dominance, had never faced such behavior. They sent message after message to their own ships, only to realize their communications were being mimicked by human AI, giving false orders that led them into ambush after ambush. In one chilling moment, a Zaltari cruiser received a retreat command, only to find itself cornered by 3 stealth bombers that had been waiting in silence for hours. The human fleet operated like a hive, their coordination flawless. The drones didn't wait for orders. They acted on pattern recognition and battlefield learning. Human pilots trusted their systems, but even more, they trusted each other. Many had trained together in Earth's underground simulators, practicing these exact tactics over and over. Every death in the earlier attacks had become a lesson, and every survivor had become a weapon. Above the battlefield, Earth's orbital relay satellites thought to be destroyed suddenly came online. Not to fight, but to project. Thousands of transmissions flooded the Zaltari ships, images of Earth's ruined cities, of families buried in Martian dust, of soldiers standing in firelight swearing vengeance. And then, the final image, a message in every galactic language. We warned you, now we teach you. It was not meant to intimidate, it was meant to remind. The warning written in the stars was no myth, it was memory. The Zaltari tried to retreat, but their escape routes were already blocked. Human ships had waited beyond Saturn's moons, in the deepest cold of space. The Zaltari command, vessel, pride of their empire, attempted a blind warp jump. But Earth's cyber specialist had corrupted its navigation. It jumped into its own fleet, causing a chain reaction that left a dozen cruisers drifting in a flame. And then, without a sound, the battle ended. The silence returned. Where once the Zaltari moved with dominance, now only fragments remained. Human ships didn't chase the survivors. They let them run. Not out of mercy, but strategy. They wanted the story to spread. The survivors would return to their empire and speak of the day the humans did the impossible. Of how they turned space itself into a battlefield. How they rewrote the rules of war, and how they struck not just with weapons, but with memory, fear, and fire. Back on Earth, there was no celebration. There were no parades, no cheering crowds. Just quiet determination. Engineers returned to their blueprints, medics treated the wounded, and the command centers began planning the next phase. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had drawn first blood, not in defense but in retribution, and now the galaxy watched. Some in awe, some in fear, all in silence. The void around Saturn would forever be known as the place where the Zaltari first understood the truth. They had not attacked a weak world. They had awakened a storm. The defeat at Saturn did more than hurt the Zaltari. It shook the foundations of their empire. What was meant to be an easy conquest had turned into a disaster no one in their long history could explain. The high warlords argued in silence, their pride wounded, their military confused, their people whispering of a power they had mocked too soon. News spread quickly, across star systems, between governments, through pirate channels and black market networks. Humanity had fought back and won. The message rippled like a storm, reaching planets untouched by war, stirring curiosity in the minds of those who had once ignored Earth. Suddenly, diplomats who had never been taken seriously were now invited to speak. Records of Earth's past were re-examined, and old warnings once laughed at were now discussed with a tremble in the voice. Who were these humans truly? How had they, in so little time, learned to destroy ships built by species thousands of years older? While the galaxy questioned, Earth prepared. The humans were not done. They knew the Zaltari would strike again, but this time, they would not wait. The Council of Earth approved Operation Echofall, their first full counterstrike across enemy-held space. It was not a plan of invasion, but of reminder. Humanity would strike key Zaltari locations not to conquer, but to send a message. You are not untouchable. The first target was a supply base on the dark side of the twin moons of Thal 9, a frozen world deep within enemy territory. The Zaltari had never defended it heavily. It had always been out of reach. But not anymore. A human stealth fleet, silent and hidden in the glare of nearby suns, drifted past enemy patrols and landed special forces with zero warning. The base was taken in under 7 minutes. No gunfire, no explosions, just hacked systems, sleeping, guards, and sudden silence. A few hours later, the base exploded from within, triggered by timed charges. Debris scattered across the void, and the humans were gone before reinforcements arrived. They left only one thing behind: a small floating probe transmitting a signal, a human voice reading the names of every person lost in the first Zaltari attack on Mars. The second strike was louder. A weapons factory orbiting a gas giant, known for building dreadnought hulls, was surrounded by defenses that had never been tested. Humanity tested them. Coordinated cyber attacks shut down their sensors. Cloaked torpedoes struck the structure's spine. Human pilots, many of whom had learned to fly on simulators back home, weaved through the fire and confusion like veterans. The factory fell within hours. Human ships didn't stay to gloat. They vanished back into the black, leaving only smoke and silence. As the attacks continued, quick, precise, and unpredictable, the Zaltari's confidence began to crack. They responded with anger, sending more ships to patrol their borders, but the more they stretched, the more vulnerable they became. Their admirals grew paranoid, their soldiers nervous. Meanwhile, their people, once loyal and proud, began to question everything. If a primitive species could do this, what did it say about the strength of their empire? And behind closed doors, rebellion brewed. But Earth was not acting alone anymore. The shockwaves of their resistance had reached far across the stars, waking others. Small nations, long under Zaltari control, began to rise. Old resistances lit their torches again, whispering the name of the planet that had fought back. Smugglers carried human tech to distant worlds. Engineers from allied species offered their skills to the cause. And then, for the first time, another world joined Earth openly. The Yisari, a quiet race of thinkers and historians, broke their silence. They revealed a truth buried for centuries. Long ago, the Zaltari had encountered humans before and lost. Back when humanity had barely touched space, when their first colonies failed and their ships crawled through the stars, they had already shown something terrifying: the refusal to surrender. The ancient warning carved into derelict worlds? It wasn't superstition. It was survival advice passed down by those lucky enough to escape the last time humans were provoked. And now, they had returned, more united and dangerous than ever. The Zaltari tried to hide this history, but it was too late. The truth spread like wildfire. Across the stars, banners began to rise, not in honor of conquest, but in rebellion. Humanity had become a symbol, not of power, but of resistance. The reckoning had begun, and the Zaltari, once feared above all, were now being hunted in their own skies. Back on Earth, leaders watched the stars closely. They did not celebrate. They knew the war was far from won. The enemy was still vast. But now, Earth was not alone. They had turned fear into fire, grief into unity, and silence into strength. Across the galaxy, they were no longer the forgotten world behind Sol. They were a name spoken with caution. And as their fleets prepared for the next strike, one truth echoed louder than any weapon. The universe had been warned, and now it would remember why. The stars above the burning Zaltari capital flickered as if they too were holding their breath. What had begun as a warning carved into the ruins of forgotten worlds had now become a reality too loud to ignore. Human warships, once cobbled together in desperation, now moved like seasoned beasts through space, their hulls scarred but proud, their captains focused, not on destruction, but on purpose. The final mission was not about revenge anymore. Earth's leaders had understood something deeper. Fear could only take a war so far, but change, real change, required something greater. As the combined fleet of humanity and its new allies pushed into the core systems of the Zaltari, they faced not a united empire, but one crumbling from within. Civil unrest had spread like infection. Whole sectors refused orders. Some surrendered before a single human ship appeared. Others raised white lights, declaring independence. Yet not all resistance was gone. The high command of the Zaltari had gathered at their oldest fortress world, a planet once thought invincible, protected by orbiting cannons, sensor walls, and gravity traps. They believed humanity would never dare face them there. But they were wrong. The Allied fleet arrived without announcement. They did not broadcast threats or demands. Instead, they launched a single satellite into orbit, a recording device. Its signal echoed through every channel, every screen, every neural network. And then, without music or special effects, it played the message rewritten. A calm human voice spoke, not in anger, but in warning. We are humanity. You were told, once, not to provoke us. You did not listen. You burned our cities, killed our children, mocked our weakness. But we survived, we learned, we grew. And now we stand here, not as conquerors, not as monsters, but as proof that no force, no empire, no history can silence the will of a free people. As the message played, human ships moved into position, not to fire, but to hold. They had learned something during this war. True power was not shown by how many worlds you could destroy, but by how many you could protect. Admiral Soren Vale, standing on the command bridge of the Helios, did not give the order to attack. Instead, he opened a live channel directly to the Zaltari leaders. For the first time, humanity did not speak in fear or rage, but with control. "We do not come to erase your kind," he said, voice steady. "We come to end the cycle you forced upon this galaxy. Surrender your warlords. Disarm your fleets. Free the systems you hold in chains. Or face a silence greater than death. The silence of being forgotten." The Zaltari hesitated. Their pride, their history, their long-standing belief in superiority, trembled under the weight of undeniable defeat. And then slowly the lights on their defense grid went dark, one by one. Surrender came not as a moment, but as a wave. Not because they feared more death, but because they finally believed the truth. Humanity was no longer the outsider. They were now part of the galactic story, and not as victims or vengeful warriors, but as something new. Peacekeepers born in fire. The galaxy changed that day, not with the fall of a city, but with the rewriting of a legend. Old races who had hidden behind neutrality stepped forward, offering apologies and aid. Refugees returned to their homes. Treaties were signed in orbit over Earth, with species that once would not even acknowledge its existence. And most importantly, the ruins scattered across 100 worlds, the ones marked with the warning "Never provoke humanity," were visited again. But this time, humans came not to destroy but to restore. They rebuilt libraries, restored temples, shared knowledge, freely. Where fire had once raged, now gardens bloomed, but they never forgot. The war had left scars too deep to erase. Memorials stood on every world touched by the Zaltari assault. Every name lost was etched into stone or starlight, read each year by voices both human and alien. And yet, even in grief, hope grew. Children born under alien suns learned Earth's history in schools. Songs were sung in many tongues about the day the stars stood still. Humanity had become not just a force, but a story. A story of what happens when the underestimated rise, when the wounded refuse to break, when the message once written as a warning becomes a promise that freedom, once ignited, cannot be crushed. On the edge of the galaxy, where ancient warnings had once been carved into lifeless moons, a new monument was built, not by humans but by the people they had saved. It read in every known language, "They came from the silent world. They rose from the ashes. They remembered their dead. And they rewrote the stars." Humanity stood not above others but beside them. And the stars, for the first time in thousands of years, were silent not from fear, but from peace.